In the early to mid 1990s, fighting games were like a dime a dozen. Most of them drew inspiration from Street Fighter II, but there were more than a few that tried to forge their own path, which was met with varying degrees of success. As evidenced by the legacy that followed this one, you can say that this was one of the successful ones. Today, let's take a look at the game that started this legacy, or at least one of its best known home versions of it, and we're talking about Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis. So let's dig in. While many fighting games are simply a tournament to decide the world's best fighter, there's a little bit more story here. You see, our entire plane of existence is at stake, and its champion is to be decided in a tournament of the world's greatest fighters. Okay, maybe it goes a little bit deeper than that, but not too much. This is a fighting game after all, and storyline isn't what gets people to pump quarters into the machines. What does get people feeding the machines is gameplay. In the arcades, Mortal Kombat didn't just stand out because of the visuals. The arcade's button layout and control scheme was a lot simpler than that of Street Fighter II and the various SNK fighters which were also around, and its special attacks were a lot easier to pull off, making for Mortal Kombat to be a much more pick-up-and-play game. I think this is a very big draw to the game. On the Genesis, Mortal Kombat does support the 6-button controllers, but the gameplay is not at all compromised if you use a standard 3-button. In fact, I kinda like how it plays with the 3-button over the 6. Granted, some of the controls and a few of the special attacks and fatalities have been altered in this version to accommodate the 3-button controller, but that does not make the game any less playable. As for the visuals, while nowhere as impressive as the arcade or even Super Nintendo ports, they're still quite good for the time period. They show their age nowadays, but I was definitely impressed when I first saw them, especially having never seen a game with digitized actors before. It was a clever concept which, when combined with the bloodshed, it really added to the draw of the visual design. And as for that bloodshed, it is a huge draw to the game. As I'm sure many of you already know, the Super Nintendo version was heavily censored, and even the word fatality was removed. The Genesis version was also censored, but you could unlock some of the arcade violence by way of a code. For those who are unfamiliar, and I can't imagine there's too many out there, during the intro there's this screen that is often referred to as the Code of Honor. You'll know it when you see it. You just key on the controller A, B, A, C, A, B, B. You know, like Abacab, the Genesis album, just with an extra B on the end. Genesis, 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 Genesis. How'd I not notice that before? Anyway, if it weren't for the uproar and reaction to the violence, would this game still be considered any good? I don't know. Personally, I feel the game is decent in the gameplay and everything else about it, but it is still just a fighting game, and as I said in the beginning of this video, there were hundreds of them in this time period. It certainly needed something to push it to the forefront, and in a case of no publicity being bad publicity, I'm sure people heard about this ultra-violent game with blood and decapitations and had to check it out. It wasn't the first game to have a lot of violence, but none of the others were talked about in quite the same way. I think I've spoken enough about the visual presentation, but what about the music and the sound? Well, in the Genesis version, it is really nothing to write home about. The sound is very generic, and a lot of the effects and samples were cut or watered down dramatically for this version. The music was also very watered down. It still has that Eastern flair, but nowhere as impressive as in the arcade or the PC or the Sega CD or even the Super Nintendo versions, and let's not even talk about the more recent ports. The arcade soundtrack is something I find to be really unique, and I've always enjoyed it. Mortal Kombat did a lot of things extremely right in its first outing of what's currently a 13-game franchise over the span of 23 years, not counting spin-offs. Characters like Sub-Zero, Raiden, and Johnny Cage are iconic, as are basic staples of Mortal Kombat gameplay such as the sweep kick and the uppercut. There were a great number of imitators, but none ever truly came close. Unlike the Street Fighter sequels, which did follow their own course of evolution, the Mortal Kombat series seemed to change in leaps and bounds from game to game. However, they did still keep some air of familiarity. Which game in the Mortal Kombat series was your favorite? Leave a comment down below. Personally, mine has always been Mortal Kombat 2. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.